get going here. Welcome everyone, welcome. Good morning, and welcome to Keeping Career Connections at Home Edition webinar series. My name is Michael Manzano and I'm with Career Connection at Bow Valley College. We've been having these webinars throughout this past month just to help you guys with your job search, help you guys with your family life, help you during these different times. So today we've got two amazing people. So we've got people from the founders of COLO Families here with us today. We've got Li and Julia Imanoff. Did I say that correctly, Julia? So now we are going to talk about your situation at home. So we did kind of talk about our situations at home. But you know what? It can get kind of crazy. We did talk a little bit about how it can get insane, kind of like the Hunger Games. You know, for me, it's always tapping on my shoulder. They're like, Daddy, 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 help me with this, help me with that. Daddy, I'm hungry. Daddy, I'm this. Daddy, I'm that. And all the while, I'm trying to get work done. I don't know what your guys' situation might be looking like. Maybe you're job searching at the same time. Maybe you've got pets who are always on top of your keyboards or all those different kinds of distractions. Whatever it is with your family, I mean, we're going to have our speakers today, Aaron and Julia, talk about how you guys can handle those situations, how you guys can juggle all of this insanity during this time. So, Aaron, Julia, how have you been today?
Oh, good. It was a good start in the morning. So far the kids are preoccupied right now, so it's a good start.
Nice.
Fingers crossed.
Good stuff. So we want to try to manage those stressors, manage those emotions. So you guys have some great strategies for us today, right? Why don't I pass it over to you guys and yeah, tell us how we can make our home lives better, especially these days.
Awesome. I'm just going to set up my screen. Okay, is my screen up?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, hello and good morning, Bow Valley College and community members. Thank you again, Michael, for that introduction, and Bow Valley College for this opportunity. It is definitely, during these pandemic times, a time to remember, and it's also a time that we're going to get through it as well. So just a little bit about ourselves. My name is Li, and I have here with my colleague, Julia Imanoff. We are from COLO Families, and COLO Families is an organization that's created for parents, by parents, by registered nurses. So we're both registered nurses. We have a passion for family and community health. So what we want to do is we want to help foster healthy child development by providing parents with education and support regarding their needs of growing. And we know that kids they grow rapidly and exponentially, and we want to focus on three main things, which is around eat, play, and sleep. And right now during COVID and being stuck at home, it's a great time to revisit those topics and kind of hone in on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. So Julia and myself, we're also parents, and we have our own family, and we've got our own little ones. And my little ones are just like, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and she's so bright, but she's one of those kids that needs structure. And having her not in school has been very challenging, because school really puts her into that place. So it's been quite the change for us up here at home. So from our professional and our own personal experience, we know the important roles that parents play. And if you guys have kids, you know what I'm talking about. Parents are so fundamental for kids to latch on to and to gravitate towards and really develop, both intellectually and emotionally. But these are busy times. These are unprecedented times, and we all need a little help. And COLO Families, we've got some great information that we're going to share with you a little bit later in this presentation about how to bring those basics back. And you can also check us out on our website to find out a little bit more about us, about the right information, about the right time for you from the right sources that are out there. So we are glad to be here with you today to talk about helping families grow together with a little twist of a COVID edition. Um, just over a month ago, if you can remember what that was, families had to quickly adapt and adjust to working, studying, parenting at home, and survival was the game. And like Michael said at the introduction, it's like the Hunger Games, and it really is kind of, especially being stuck in a house, four walls, with strict social distancing recommendations. It's kind of like a pressure cooker, right? A lot of kids that were in the school system had to shift to home and learning online, remote access. A lot of people working had to really shift and had to bring that home as well and have remote access. Non-essential services have been closed. And, you know, there are talks now that they're opening up phases now, mid-May and forward. But a month ago, it was shut down. People have been facing more stressful situations than usual, and that is an understatement. That is just something that everyone's been struggling with. Change is hard, and a lot of people just don't like change. And having this huge ask of us to shift studying, working, parenting at home can be very challenging. You've been through a lot, so let's rewind a bit. So on the screen, you'll see a picture on the left and the right. Some people might have had this great idea of how working at home might look like. So when that first announcement of being isolated at home, work at home, stay at home, schooling at home, a lot of people were kind of getting ready for this, thinking about how it would look like. And I came across a couple of statements of that I was able to find online through various postings on social media. And people were saying, wow, I can finally focus on things I've neglected on. Another one was, yes, more time with my kids. I've always wanted that. Or another statement would be, I can finally get around to fixing that thing. And that's still on my list to do as well. My wife keeps on nagging me, can you fix that? It's been like 4 weeks now. And another one is precious time that I will never get back. Like there's always that saying of, these are precious moments, take advantage of it. So those were statements floating around, and we are more than 4 weeks into this now. How are you guys doing, really? Let's do a reality check. What is actually happening in your house? And at the beginning of the presentation, Michael was asking you guys to put in the chat box, what does it look like in your house? Like, is it staying together? Are your floors just overwhelmed with toys and this and that? So just a reality check that there were so many expectations heading into this, but in reality, it is what it is. You're juggling a lot, right? But I want to say to all of you, good work, great job, kudos to you guys. It's been a long 4 and more weeks, and we're showing that parents are really getting this and thrown into it, and we're doing okay. So I want you guys to take a moment, just to take a pause, and everyone together, just take a deep breath and give yourself that recognition of and self-compassion that you did it, you're doing it, right? I often have to really myself throughout the day, many times throughout the day, is just pause and take a deep breath. So I really want to encourage you guys to do that. Give yourself that pat on the back that you so deserve, and that you're not getting recognized for, and take a bow and know that together, your family, you've got this, right? So again, later on, Julia's going to share a little bit about some kind of tips about how to keep that going. We know that these are unprecedented times in history, right? We're hearing this on the news We got daily updates. And it's not surprising that Canadians are experiencing increased levels of stress and anxiety. So it is okay to be experiencing this, because this is something we're going through, and this is something that you should be processing, right? So stress and anxiety, but we want to be able to find ways of, okay, how can we not let that stress go too high, right? Families had to figure out how to do this, right, together. We've all had a plan, right? Before COVID happened, we had kids scheduled to go to school. We had kids going to day homes, day centers. We had kids going to grandparents or just down the block, the neighbor. But that's all been thrown out, right? And these are stressful times. There was a survey done between March 29th and April 3rd of just this last month by Statistics Canada, and they conducted a survey. And again, not shocking, but the results were that they found that Canadians were anxious about the healthcare system. So 84% that were surveyed found that they were anxious and worried about the healthcare system. Do we have the capacity in the hospitals to take on the peak? The peak hasn't even happened yet, right? Do we have enough ventilators? That's always a hot word. Do we have enough beds to accommodate the peak that's coming? 54% that were surveyed are anxious and stressed about family members. You might be worried about maybe your own parents, maybe living in a long-term care facility, or maybe living across the city and you haven't been able to connect face-to-face with them. Maybe you've got parents or relatives living in another province or another city, right? So you're constantly thinking about that. 36% are worried and stressed about our own health. So you might be a frontline worker, or you might be working in essential services. You're heading out there every day. You're potentially the risk of catching the virus, being exposed, and now you're bringing it home. So you're worried about that. And then 32% are worried about family stress. So I was talking about that whole pressure cooker analogy. That can pop any minute, right? Because we're so confined for so long. There was another interesting study, and it was, they're still in their preliminary works at it, but there was a study done in University of Manitoba. And after the first week of the study, they found that there were higher rates of parental distress. And again, not shocking. About 64% are reporting symptoms of depression. 31% are reporting symptoms of anxiety. And these are significant clinical signs. And again, it's not shocking because parents are trying to balance work, childcare, finance, all together, right? You've got all of these things juggling up in the air. 40% of families are still having challenges with unmet childcare needs. Like, as we were talking earlier today, like, how do we get work done when I've got a toddler, an infant, preschooler, a teenager, right? Just kind of stuck around in the house. 43% are stressed about negative impacts of employment, where there's talks about, the first hit of recession was early in April, and there's talks about it happening again soon. 17% are worried about job loss. So the stats and the numbers are there, and those numbers were based on just that first week of isolation. I wouldn't be surprised and shocked if those numbers are even higher now that we're 4 and plus more weeks into this. There's a lot to manage. And yet there's so much to ask from us, right? There's these expectations that are asked from us. I will say that, most employers and education institutions, there is a lot of forgiveness around during these times, but sometimes we put these expectations on ourselves. We put them on ourselves. You're trying to do it all. And I'm guilty of this too, but sometimes I find myself trying, I leave my laptop out on our kitchen dining room table, and it's stuck there. It's like a permanent centerpiece on my dining table because it's constantly on 24/7. Do you find yourself doing that too? Because I feel like I need to, for some reason, need to have it there because I need to keep on working. I'm guilty of that. And the funny thing is, I find myself working even more than before, but I'm at home more and I'm spending less time with my kids. So that's the irony of it too. It's like, that doesn't seem right, the math. And I often catch myself telling my my 6-year-old daughter, I need 1 more minute. I need to get this done. I also say this to her, I can't play with you right now. I'm busy. And after I say those phrases, it really hurts because I catch myself in that moment saying, oh, that wasn't right. But yet I still do it. Um, and when I do find time to play with my daughter, I might choose a game like, okay, let's play hide and seek. And do you know what I do? I go hide, but I take my device with me. And I find the best sneaky place ever in the house and hide there. And I've got like a good 20 minutes of work there before she finds me. So that is not a tip for you guys because we're trying to get away from that. But that is just something that's starting to happen. And the funny thing about devices too, like the whole idea of being able to, the mobile devices, bring it to another part of the room is we're seeing an increase of users on devices. And that survey by Statistic Canada too, they surveyed and found that Canadians are spending more time on the internet, right? Of course, you're stuck at home and you've got multiple devices. And because of that too, we are constantly being flooded with a ton of information we were already flooded with that before COVID, right? The whole idea of internet pushing data on you. But now it's like COVID this, COVID that, COVID this, COVID that. And you're always getting these pings, these chimes, these notification bells on you, talking about the latest update, social distancing, physical distancing, how to manage stress, or how long the lineup is at Costco. So they keep on sending you this information. And it's not getting any better too, because we tend to, as humans, try to fit as many devices we can between ourselves and the wall. So you've got your laptop, you've got your desktop, you've got your TV, you've got your other TV, and then don't forget you've got your smartwatch that's always pinging, and we're always checking, and we're getting bombarded and overwhelmed with so much information, and that is also taking away our time potentially with our family, right? Because we're constantly checking. So today, I'm going to hand it over to Julia, but she's going to share some helpful tips and resources to support you during this challenging and unprecedented times of studying, working, parenting, surviving at home. So with that, I'm going to send it over to Julia.
Thanks, Aaron. I know I have really bad internet connection, so as I dive into this, if part of my talk cuts out, please just put in the chat and I'll repeat my sentence. But yeah, like Aaron said, today in the discussion, we're going to review some helpful strategies to manage those big emotions, yours, your family members, your children. We're going to learn about talking about COVID and how to do that, especially with kids, and ways to meet our needs for social connection in amongst this pandemic where physical distancing is really the name of the game. But first, to manage any emotions, we really do need to start with basic human needs. Whether you're a parent or maybe you're the child in the relationship, whether you live alone or with your family, there are some basic needs that we all have. We need to eat, play, and sleep. In addition, we need to have our needs met in a reliable and predictable way. Without our basic needs met, we're less likely to have the capacity to cope with much else. In fact, not having these needs met actually can amp up our flight and fight response and make us more anxious. And that's on a given day, like a regular day, not a COVID day. So I'm going to go through these 5 steps to help manage your basic needs throughout your day. So we'll go through developing a routine, fueling your body, moving your body, stimulating your mind, and creating time for rest. So some of these things you might already be doing, you might know very well, but I'm going to flip the needs to not just be about meeting your body's physical need for food to actually fuel your body, but also we'll talk about it in terms of managing emotions. So just to flip the way that you're thinking about stuff you probably already know. Starting with routines, it might help to manage some of your needs to make a rough plan about what needs you want to have met throughout your day and how. It doesn't have to be like a minute-by-minute playbook of what your day will look like, but just a general idea of what to do that day. You know, day 1 in COVID, we might have still been showering and getting ourselves dressed for work in the morning, even though we were probably working online or doing online learning. You know, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 30, pajama bottoms, maybe a shower once every few days. The routine starts to fall apart, but it really can help to bring that structure back to your day and help you feeling like you're in control and that you're able to get things done. Now, that can be a bit more challenging if you've got a family managing. You can have the best laid plans, but those of you with little children, you probably know, the more moving parts you have, the wildly unpredictable children you have, your plan may not go the way you want. I think the key with kids is to have a rough idea of maybe activities that you move through without having a set time. Kids might pay attention to, reading a book for a few minutes one day. They might be longer attention span the next day. So the main thing is going with the flow, but having a rough routine throughout your day. We have a blog post about this on our website, and I think we posted it in social media as well. And it basically talks about a rough idea of how to plan your morning with kids to meet their needs. And it's kids usually between the ages of 1 and 5. And it starts off with, a good breakfast, some playtime, some more activities, story time, snack time, and more playtime. You'll notice that there's lots of play to get some energy out, but also some story time and downtime in there too. So it kind of fluctuates the level of stimulation for them. And that's kind of what we all need throughout the day. You'll also notice that there's food, usually every few hours with kids. You want to offer them food throughout the day because as your brain is working, it actually burns a lot of calories. So even when you're sitting doing nothing, or it feels like you're doing nothing, you might be learning a lot and processing information, and that still requires fuel. Now, as adults, we're not always as good as recognizing when our bodies are full. Sometimes when we're overly anxious, we might eat more. We might forget to eat because we're so stressed. We might binge eat the wrong foods because it's comforting. We might forget to drink water. All these things kind of play a part in the COVID situation that we're in now. But trying to make sure that you have fuel for your body, which means good energy as much as possible, and especially foods that can boost your immune system. Things with vitamins A, C, E, and D are really important for that. But I also get that being prescriptive about what foods you should be eating in a time of a pandemic may or may not be helpful. Some of us are struggling to make ends meet with job insecurities, job losses. That can also translate into food insecurity. We've been seeing more people accessing food banks in the recent month. And so I think the key to focus on with fueling your body is just trying to make sure that you can have regular food throughout your day, whatever that looks like, whatever the challenge is for you. Our bodies do need a balance of food, but also water to stay hydrated and to keep functioning well. And this is crucial for our immune system as well. I don't know about you, but when I'm at home, I find I drink way less water than when I'm at work. I have to really be reminding myself to keep that water intake going. So I always, if I'm ever hungry or I reach for a snack, my first go-to is usually my water bottle. And if that deals with my snack craving, then I know I was actually thirsty. If you're a parent, you also might very clearly know the relationship between hunger and toddler meltdowns. Often a hungry kid does not emotionally regulate well. They end up being very volatile and very reactive until they kind of get food in their body. I can see this with my 2-year-old frequently. So we often offer snacks just to make sure that he can emotionally regulate. once his need for food is met, the rest of the day kind of goes a lot smoother. But kids don't always know, hey, I'm hungry, that's why I'm cranky. Some adults don't even know that. Have you ever met a grown-up who before breakfast is just like super, super cranky? And as soon as they have breakfast, it's like a switch goes off and they become really pleasant. My husband is like that. And so I know that food for him is really important for his emotional regulation. So I think keeping that in mind too, if you're trying to manage these big emotions, first make sure your other needs are met. Movement is another key need. And it might seem strange, I know everyone says you should move to stay fit and healthy, especially when we're in this COVID situation, but it's not just physical health, it's also mental health. There's a connection there between your mind and your body. And it may be obvious that, your mental state can affect how you move. When you're depressed or feeling low, sometimes our body moves slowly. It's hard to get out of bed. We might kind of drag our feet. When we're anxious, we might zip around really fast, almost in a frantic fury. But the Harvard Medical School, Dr. Pele wrote how this connection is actually a two-way street. How we move can also relate back to our mental health. So if we, take on regular exercising throughout the day, it can actually reduce the way that our brain is in fight or flight mode. So it can reduce our anxiety if we just get that regular exercise. The same goes for depressive symptoms. Exercise like cycling, gym-based aerobic, resistance or flexibility and balance exercises like yoga or Pilates, they can also help reduce depressive symptoms. So planning movements throughout your day can actually help you manage those big emotions. Sometimes I use this strategically when I'm making my routine for my day. If I know I've got something that's really stressful in my middle of my day, maybe I'll go for a walk beforehand or run afterward just to let off that stress. And just like adults, kids are no different. I mean, Erin was talking about the pressure cooker of the house, and kids are kind of like that too with their emotions and their energy. And if they don't physically get to move and release that steam, it's kind of like that button on the Instapot. You push it and it's like, and it completely takes them to a different level. But without releasing that button, they are just pressurized and ready to blow. So getting your kids to spend time through movement throughout the day, super important. It's really challenging when we had our cold weather snap at the beginning of COVID and everyone was cooped up in the house trying to figure out what to do with their kids. A little bit more challenging at that point. I can tell you we had like indoor obstacle courses trying to get them to burn off some energy. Thank goodness, I think summer or spring is finally here, fingers crossed. And we can actually get out for walks outside. Still being mindful to keep distances. I know when we go to our green space near our house, we usually go off the track. We go off the path and our kids just play in the dirt where the trees are planted and they'll play there for a good half an hour. We have to go inside and wash up afterward, but really, when you think of the pressure release, it's totally worth it just to have them have to come in and have a shower. We also tried doing some silly things like trying to walk like different animals. So you can kind of make a game out of the movements if you need a little bit more like encouragement to get your kid up and moving. Moving your body isn't the only thing that you need to stimulate though. We also need to stimulate our brain. As adults, I know a lot of us, when we heard the first few days of COVID, everyone was thinking, yes, now it's the time I can be really productive. I'm stuck at home. People might have signed up for tons of online classes thinking they're going to do it all. And by day 3, 4, 5, the binge watching on Netflix really kicked in. It's because we also need that in moderation. We want that stimulation. We want that excitement and engagement from our brains, but you also don't want to overdo it because you also need rest to process that information. Kids go through the same thing with over and under stimulation. So you really need to be careful and mindful of what those activities look like for you or for your kids. Things like watching a movie can be over or under stimulating depending on what you're watching. Things like reading a book can be downtime and relaxing, or it can be really stimulating. Again, depends on what you're reading. With kids, they give you cues if they're bored or not. If kids are bored and understimulated, you might see them start to act out to get attention or to change things up. If they're overstimulated, you might see them trying to shut down and try and remove themselves from the stimulation because it's too much. Thankfully for ourselves as adults, we can kind of regulate our own stimulation a little bit better. So if you're feeling overstimulated, it's a good idea to go for a walk and reduce that stimulation. And if you're feeling understimulated, then yeah, pick up that book. Or it could even just be a great conversation with a friend. Book a call for a virtual coffee and have a good chat. All of us really need to consider that balance between the stimulation though. Just like when you want to go for a run, you're not going to be running all the time. You also don't want to just sit on your couch all the time. It's all about balance, everything in moderation. We also need to plan in sleep. Our body needs sleep, obviously. Sleep helps our brain process information, so it actually can help us learn and retain things, which is great, and it helps our body rest, restores our energy, keeps us moving for the next day. But there's also a lot that you can do to promote yourself, like a good sleep hygiene or good sleep habits to prompt having restful sleeps. And these are things like limiting your nap time during the day, if you're lucky enough to be able to nap during the day, keeping it short to no more than 30 minutes. If you nap longer than that, it doesn't actually help make up for sleep from the night before. It actually can make you more tired and decrease your quality of sleep later on. Avoiding stimulants close to bedtime, things like coffee, caffeine, nicotine, too close to bedtime can actually stimulate your body, and so it'll be harder to wind down and have a good night's sleep. Things like alcohol can be tricky too, because some people use it to help them fall asleep, but as your body metabolizes alcohol, it actually can wake you up and have more disruptions throughout your sleep. Exercise is a great idea to promote good quality sleep. But you also want to be careful not to exercise too vigorously too close to bedtime, because it gets all the adrenaline and endorphins going in your body, wakes you up, and then it makes it really hard to calm back down. So just making sure if you are going to exercise, don't do it right before bed. Steering clear of foods that can cause some irritation, like some heartburn. Things like fatty foods, fried meals, spicy meals, or citrus drinks can really prevent you if you're going to lay down to go to sleep. It just feels like it's all coming right back up into your esophagus, and it feels really uncomfortable. For a lot of people, that's actually a medical condition called GERD. But if you just avoid those foods close to bedtime, sometimes it'll go away just on its own. You also want to establish a relaxing bedtime routine. It kind of cues your brain to start winding down. It might be things like turning off the lights or dimming lights before bed, slowly making your way to your bedroom, maybe having like a shower before bed, and then when you make your way to your bedroom, dimming the lights again and kind of getting into a calm and relaxed state. Limiting screen time, bright lights like from cell phones or TVs or screens before bed can also help your brain shut down. Screens can often mix up our circadian rhythm of when we're supposed to be cueing to go to sleep. So limit your screen time before bed. With little ones, sleep hygiene is mostly up to the parent. We kind of establish our kids' sleep hygiene. And what that looks like is our bedtime routines. Whether it's bedtime or nap time, usually it's kind of the same routine for the same reason as we do it with adults. It cues our brains to say, hey, it's time to sleep. With nap time and bedtime routines for little ones, you want to keep them fairly consistent, but the nap time routine should be much shorter because they're napping for a shorter period of time. Most kids between 0 and 4 will nap for 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the age, and they may nap once or twice a day, again, depending on the age. So your routines are going to have to be something that you can kind of do in bite sizes for nap time. A bedtime routine might look something like having a bath, putting on jammies, getting ready for bed, having a few stories, lights out, 2 songs, and then the parent leaves. The nap time routine should be very similar, but much shorter, because that might take a whole hour before bed. The nap time routine might just be the 3 stories, lights out, and 2 songs, which would be closer to 10, 15 minutes. Either way, you want to make sure that you're practicing some nice sleep hygiene habits to cue your body up to have a restful sleep. That will keep you energized so that you can stay productive and in a good headspace to mentally cope with those big emotions. Once our basic needs are met, then we have a greater capacity to manage other emotions, especially in the days that we're facing right now with COVID. We're facing some big emotions. The more we're able to take on and manage these type of emotions, it actually helps build our self-confidence that we can do it. So by addressing our basic needs first, we're actually setting ourselves up for success to manage the really challenging stuff. Thanks to research from places like the University of Calgary, the Owerco Center, the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative showcases tons of research, and the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. They all are focusing more on brain development and child development in terms of brain science. And we're learning a lot more about the basic steps we use to develop emotional regulation, basically how we're managing emotions. And one of the building blocks for this is called serve and return. And it's a phrase that we often use in child development of how adults can communicate with young children. It's kind of like a tennis match where a baby would serve up a cue to the parent and like cooing at them or laughing or crying. And then the adult would respond in a sensitive and appropriate way. And this back and forth is the essential building block for brain connections, for our language and communication skills, and also for emotional regulation. The interesting thing is that it teaches a kid so much more than just that. It shows a child that when they're communicating, they're actually communicating what they want to, that they're communicating well when their parents respond to that cue. So it builds their confidence that they're able to communicate. It also increases their sense of love and belonging and being heard by a parent responding appropriately to that cue. And they feel a sense of security that their needs are going to be met by their parent. The funny thing is, although this is kind of foundational, that it starts even in infancy, the importance of serve and return communication isn't just limited to infants. It works with young children, teenagers, adults, and older family members as well. Only the communication isn't a nonverbal cue. Sometimes it really is just a communication, and we need to respond to each other in these sensitive and appropriate ways. Our core desire is to be seen and heard as human beings. In fact, Dr. Brene Brown, who's a professor of social work from the University of Houston, said in her podcast, Unlocking Us, that it is our essential goal as human beings to be seen and heard. And this helps us meet all of our social needs, feeling loved and feeling a sense of belonging. That's what our kids are craving. You know, when Aaron and when Michael were sharing how it's like, Daddy, can you come play with me? What they're saying is, I need a sense of love and belonging. And obviously, like, that's not the language that they're going to use. What kid would ever say that? They say, come play with me, come read with me, come do this with me. And it's really hard when we say, I just need a minute to do this, because what it's telling them is this work is more important. And we all do it. I do it a lot as well. But the challenge is to realize it and reflect on it and respond in a different way. Sometimes having those routines and that schedule set up can be really helpful when you say, you know, we've got a date to read a book and cuddle on the couch together in 10 minutes. I'm even going to work for that 10 minutes to get this done so that I can be just with you and that my mind won't be on my work because you are so important to me. And that increases their sense of connection and belonging, but you're still juggling your productivity and your work. It really is a balance, everything in moderation. The challenge here too is that with physical distance, we're actually putting two scientific principles in juxtaposition. Physical distancing, now at 6 feet, we have to stay away from each other, really puts at jeopardy our social connections. We need physical distancing to stop the spread of COVID, stop the infection from spreading everywhere, and hopefully build up our herd immunity. But we also have this fundamental need for social connection, and that is for our mental and physical well-being. So how do we still stay physically distant, but still retain our social connections? Now, this might be more screen time with connecting with other people. Even with Bow Valley College, you guys have a great community online that you guys are doing these webinars, which is fantastic. That's one way of establishing those community connections and maintaining them, even though we physically can't be together. It might mean having dinner via Zoom with your family who are not in the same house as you. But with kids, they do need a lot of that connection. And even with kids, it's harder for them to connect with their peers via a screen. They often don't have in-depth conversations on a screen like maybe adults would. They don't sit still for that long, first of all. At least mine don't. So how do we do it? Does that mean that as parents, we are the sole provider of all of the social connections that our kids are going to have? At this point in time, it might mean that. It might mean if you can isolate with grandparents that you can bring other people in as well, but largely it's up to you. Now, I'm not saying that you have to provide serve and return relationships every minute of every day, 24/7 to your children or all of your children in your household, because that's just not realistic. I know I can't do it. It would put you at your wit's end. The good thing is that the social connection and the serve and return relationships aren't something that you need to do every minute of every day. They kind of have a built-in buffer where if the child feels a sense of love and belonging and security, they won't need to crave it and search for it as often. If they know that when they need it, you are there, they won't reach out to test you to see if they need it all the time. So it's important to be able to, when you can, pause your work and say, Mommy, can you play with me? Yes, I'm going to pause this now and I'm going to go and play with you and I'll come back to this later. But set some timelines and some limitations on it too, because obviously you still need to get some work done. And when you're in things like meetings, that may not be feasible. So there needs to be some ground rules and clear expectations. But the clearer you are with when and how you guys can play together and when you can put your work down to be with your children, the more trusting they will be that you are going to meet their needs later and they won't come to you as often. So managing some of those emotions can be really tricky. I think everything is in balance. Some things to keep in mind too is that I know when I'm stressed out and my kid's asking me to come and play, I'm not going to be calm and say, yeah, no problem. I'll just pause my work and come and play with you. When I'm stressed out and I'm feeling anxious, usually that's when I'm snappy, being like, no, I can't. I need to get this done. So when you're trying to meet your kids' needs, you also have to realize that you need to meet your needs first. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane, that oxygen mask analogy. When the oxygen masks come down, they always say as an adult, you put on yours first. Because if you're okay, then you can take care of your kid. But if you don't get the oxygen first, who's going to be there to support your kid? It's the same premise. If you're not taking care of your basic needs, foundational needs we talked about earlier, there's going to be less capacity for you to be able to manage the bigger emotional needs for your kid. So you're actually putting yourself first, but for the sake of everybody else in your family. And this is the same for couples, or if you're dealing with your parents or grandparents. Taking care of your own emotional needs first will help you navigate some of those tricky situations. And that takes us into a tricky situation like talking about COVID. So whether you're talking to your friends, to parents, grandparents, or to your children about COVID, it can seem really unnerving and uncomfortable. But there are some key things to consider when you're having these conversations. Dr. Nicole Rancine and Sherry Madigan from the University of Calgary Psychology Department, they provide some great points as a guide to how to have these conversations, specifically with kids, but I think it applies to having conversations with other people as well. And the first idea is to name it to tame it. When you think about the emotions around COVID, there's a lot of fear, anxiety, a sense of losing control, but there might also be hope and love and comfort. It can help to figure out what emotion you're feeling, where it sits in your body, and then what you can do about it. And this part is emotional intelligence. It's largely underdeveloped and undervalued skill set in our society. But again, Dr. Brene Brown has shed some light on the importance of knowing our emotions in understanding how we interact and relate with other people. She actually frames it in terms of leadership, that good leaders need this skill set. And she also argues that parents are leaders in their own families. So this skill still applies. And psychologists use this, not emotional intelligence, but naming it to tame it for kids. And it's a sentiment that once we know the emotion and where we feel it in our body, we can start to reflect and perhaps understand how our emotions are also affecting our behaviors and how it can change from there. Now, I think this is a hard skill, even as an adult. There are so many different emotions that human beings can go through, even in a given day. It can be a whirlwind, and trying to put those to words for children can be even more challenging, just because they have a smaller vocabulary and maybe a smaller awareness or a lower awareness of emotions. So having these conversations with kids might just be to open the door to help provide words for them of how they might be feeling. It might sound something like, it's okay to feel scared or lonely or anxious right now. I'm here with you, and together we can get through this. And it might feel like that is going to open Pandora's box, When you're dealing with a small child, you might think, oh God, where's this going to go? But just being able to open that door for them, they can say, oh my God, I am scared. Like, what's going to happen to grandma and grandpa? Are they going to be okay? And then you can start to have that conversation with them. Another important point is to tailor the information for your audience. So it depends on who you're talking to, in terms of their developmental age, in terms of kids, or their awareness of the situation. But making sure you tailor the level of detail to the person that you're talking to. I'll use my kids as an example, because my 2-year-old is very different in terms of what he can comprehend compared to my 4-year-old. So when I talk to a 2-year-old about COVID, usually we talk about invisible germs that can make us sick. We talk about keeping our bodies healthy by drinking water, by trying to eat well, and by washing our hands. With my 4-year-old, we talk about the virus as coronavirus. We talk about how it can be spread through droplets in the air between people. We talk about why work and school are canceled and why we're at home together. There's lots of different levels of detail that you can go into depending on the age of your child. And giving them opportunity for questions is going to be important in that as well. If you're uncertain of like how to bring up the conversation with COVID with your kids or where to go from there, sometimes there's good strategies like starting with a book and just reading about it. There's a great illustrated book that's a free PDF online, and it's actually animated by Axel Scheffler, who illustrated the Gruffalo and Stickman and Snail and the Whale. It's a really cute book. It was written by child educators with reference from a scientist to validate some of the immunological content. So I have a link for it below in our resources if you're interested in that. But starting with a book might be a good point of reference, a conversation starter. Some kids are not going to be worried about the pandemic at all because in their little bubble, they're okay and they don't see the bigger context, and that's fine. If they don't want to talk about it or they don't have questions, you don't have to. There's just whatever you need to context, tailor it for your audience. The next point I would say would be to stick to the facts as we know them. Like Erin was saying, there's tons of information out there, and sometimes we're bombarded. Some of the information that we have changes regularly depending on what we know. There's also a lot of opinions out there that are being spread as facts. So I think we need to be very judicious and cautious in how we share that information, especially when we're talking to our kids. We want to make sure that what we're saying is factual and reliable as much as we can. We don't want to sensationalize the pandemic to increase other people's anxieties or fears, but we also don't want to undermine the very real risks because we want to make sure that people still understand the severity of the situation. And lastly, comfort with what you can control. I think it's really important when we're talking about COVID. It can leave people feeling vulnerable and helpless, but I think there's some things that we are in control of, and how we can take care of ourselves and our families and our friends are things that we can control. When you're talking about with kids, it might be we can wash our hands, we can keep our house clean, and we'll stay socially distancing. And that's what we can do to make sure that we stay safe and do our part to stop the spread of COVID. When you're talking with adults, it might be people who want to do more to feel more in control. They might want to reach out and help their friends, their family, their communities. And that's kind of putting an action plan to COVID, which is kind of an inspirational point to end on too. So on that note, I'm going to pass it back to Erin to talk about what we can do to move forward even in this pandemic time.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, we all had a plan heading into before COVID hit us, right? And I think what Julia talked about, we can go back and meet our basic needs, know how to manage those big stressors and the emotions that we're dealing with. I think we can somewhat go back to those plans, right? Before COVID happened, and before the whole isolation restrictions were put in place, you were probably finishing your studies maybe in education. You were planning your future. You were potentially eyeing on a job posting, perhaps. You maybe are already working and you're planning on what to teach for the next semester. and what were the next topics to teach. You had great ideas, but then we had this wrench thrown in, and we had to put these restrictions in place. But just keep in mind that this is temporary, right? With a pandemic such as coronavirus, COVID-19, there are peaks and then there are lows, and then eventually there's that herd immunity that we're going to develop, vaccines later down the road, years down the road. So opportunities are going to start coming up, right? And let's talk a little bit about kind of riding that and getting ready for those opportunities. So I know that these webinar series are kind of more geared towards career searching. So we're just going to touch a little bit about that for the next little bit. Be a leader, be an innovator, and be a designer, right? So during these times of a pandemic, you might see gaps in services a little bit more clearly, right? They might be exposed a little bit more heightened because we see those fractures in services being actually a little bit bigger than we thought it would be. So take a look at that and ask yourself, is that something that you're interested in? Is that area of that service you're passionate about, right? So take a look at that and kind of dive a little bit deeper and find out a little bit more about that issue, that area of interest, and understand it a little bit more, right? The health sector has, it's a very complex and a large system. And it's not perfect, right? But it tries, right? So there are going to be areas that are going to be exposed that could show us how things could be better for next time, right? Maybe the way we were doing it before didn't quite meet the needs of families or for an individual. So take a look at that. There's so many parts and pieces to healthcare. Each one is important and it supports one another. Check with your college, university, your local health organization. And again, find out a little bit more about that particular topic and see if you can be part of that movement, right? That agent of change. So with COLO, for us, Julia and myself, we followed our areas of interest. We were registered nurses with experience in maternal child community health. And we also have experience as a parent navigating through the healthcare system, raising a family, and so forth. So we know the pains, the struggles, the challenges, and also the gains and successes of raising a family within our current healthcare system. So, you know, we have a good idea of what that is. And for you, take a look at that as well and see, again, what areas are you interested in, passionate about, and what do you want to gain more experience about? With COLO Families, our focus was to kind of help bridge those gaps and those pains and those limitations. We want to bridge them and make it a little bit easier for families to access healthcare services. So we developed this idea that COLO Families would meet the needs of the families and the communities by being community-based. And that means being there in the community, meeting where the community is at, meeting families where they're at, whether that's a geographical location or where they're at their stage of life. We want to be able to give the gift of time back to families and back to community members. There's so many stories and instances out there where to get access to healthcare services, there's so many steps to it. And once you find where you need to go, you actually need to kind of get there physically too, and that takes away time. And it takes a lot of effort to get to the service, to the appointment that you need to go. So we want to be able to provide health care, nursing care, anywhere, anytime, and with relevant information. We want to give it to the family and the community We want to give information and skills and support that's high quality information and brought to you by a trusted professional. So those were some of the things that we noticed that were some of the challenges, limitations of healthcare. And we said, hey, we want to build something. We want to be innovative about that, and we want to be able to design an approach that would be more relatable and more accessible. So back to you guys at Bow Valley College and community members. Again, figure out what's your interest. Find the gaps, make connections, seek out opportunities. Start an online job search profile. So if you're interested in healthcare, there are, I know, like Alberta Health Services, you can build a job profile and they'll save your resume and your cover letter. And you can set up alerts that would send job postings to you. So set that up, get that rolling, get that going. And then, filter those job postings by, again, your area of interest. Get out there, make connections as well. There's a lot of, I'm going to make connections digitally and online, but don't forget the power of meeting people in person as well, right? So go in and talk with friends and friends of friends and friends of friends of friends, right? So they might have information about an area that you're interested in. So really, have those coffee chats when, again, we have that chance to have those coffees together. And in the meantime, during isolation, look for opportunities to advance your skill set and your knowledge. So that might be taking certifications, workshops around that. Again, take a look at take a look at Bow Valley College. Take a look at what they're offering. Take a look at other organizations, nonprofit organizations, for example. They've got tons of resources out there that you can specialize further into. And lastly, take a look at your resume. Dust it off, polish it, update it. Be resume ready, right? Because whenever that opportunity comes up, you don't want it to slip away because we are so busy more than ever. So again, when you have that at the ready, it's a quick click and submit and apply and then wait. So have that ready and take a look at your journey that you've been through. Take a look at all the experiences that you've gained. Put that in. Make your resume stand out with that area of interest that you have. Because when someone's looking at your resume, that needs to stand out, that they can read from your resume that you have a passion and an interest in this area. So dust that resume off. For myself, my journey began in acute care. So once I graduated from nursing school, I went to acute care, and I was providing nursing care for clients in a hospital setting who had chronic renal failure. Went in, did my shift work, clocked in, clocked out. And I did that for a while, and then I realized, whoa, wait a second. There has to be more to this. So I started asking the questions of who, what, and why, and how questions, right? 5 W's. And I realized that these patients with chronic renal failure, they have a life outside of hospital. They had a life before renal failure. They have a community, right? And so I started probing that, and my journey started to turn a little bit, and my interest was more into community nursing. I wanted to actually understand a little bit more about where patients, not patients, but clients and community members and individuals, where do they come from? And that how can I help them be and maintain healthy, so they don't end up in hospital, right? So that was something that I started having to learn, and my interest started to really turn more into community health nursing. So I encourage you guys to look at what interests you, and what your journey path it has come and where it's going to go. So I'm going to let Julia share a little bit about her story as well.
I'll just share really briefly because I know we're running a little bit over. But for me, it was kind of similar to Aaron as well, where I didn't realize what my passion was going to be right from the get-go. I didn't realize what my area of interest was going to be. When I was in nursing school, I loved acute care and complex pathophysiologies and things that were really messy and medically complicated. And I always thought families and community and maternity health were kind of the light and fluffy subjects that clearly was not for me. And it wasn't until I had my final focus in labor and delivery that I found my love for helping families grow. And that passion has only developed from there, and it's shifted over time to where we're practicing now, primarily in the community. But it has been, it was not an easy journey to figure out exactly what my passion was and where it finally clicked. But I encourage you to try things. What you think you might love now might shift over time. Keep trying new things until you find that thing that really does click with you in every way. And it might be the thing that you don't expect, kind of like mine.
Yeah, I know we're at the end. So I do want to say thank you to Michael and the Bow Valley College and their community having us on today. And I guess again, like balancing work, school, and family life. It's a topic that it's hot out there, a hot topic with a lot of things that we're juggling with. So we're open to any questions. I don't know if Michael, if you were fielding any of those questions.
Yes.
But we have here, you can get a hold of us if you want to find out more information about those blogs and those articles that Julia was talking about. Those on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our website is there, www.colofamilies.com. Michael, do you have questions?
No, just thanks, Aaron. Thanks,
Yeah.
Julia. That was great. And I really like to hear that I wasn't the only one stressing about all this, wondering if I was being a good parent or, if this whole thing was just bothering me. So thank you for sharing your experiences, and thank you for all those amazing tips that, we can use, not just like if you're parents, because we've got a good mix of people here today. You never know, maybe you do have young children at home. Maybe you've got teenagers. Maybe you've got you're the grandparents or you're an aunt or uncle, and you've got relatives who are in this kind of situation. But it's always good to have that knowledge, to know what you can do to help out those children, to help out your family, to help out yourselves. So Aaron, Julia, I'm glad that you were able to mention that and just say to take that time, right? You got to take that time to really realize and self-assess yourself as well, right? Now, I do have a question. If anyone has a question, then feel free to pop it into the chat box there. Then that would be great. But I got a question for myself here. Now, Julia, you were talking about routines. And for me, routines these days are just going out the window. Forget it. I cannot keep it. I had the wonderful thought. I was that person that was yeah, this is going to be great. We can do this, 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 and this. And then, after a couple days, I'm that person that's oh my goodness, I've never missed my desk and my office so much these days, right? So how do you start a routine, and maybe how do you keep it with your family and maybe with yourself as well?
That's a great question. I think there's a few things to consider when you're making a routine. First, it's kind of what routines were your kids used to before COVID? And what routines do you want to have now that you're in COVID? So if you want to have something that was similar to your old routines that you can just bounce right back into it, that does mean still waking up early like they would for school days, getting dressed, brushing their teeth, and kind of doing that initial routine in the morning. And some kids, like some parents now are like, well, in COVID, I want them to sleep in. I don't want to have to wake up at the crack of dawn because we don't have to. And so I think you just need to have realistic expectations with where you want to be. I think, again, having a routine rather than a schedule is also another important point, where you might not have a time limit for these activities. It's not going to be like, we're going to have story time for 25 minutes today from 11 to 11:25, because that may not be realistic. But it might be moving through a series of activities in a sequence rather than a time limiting schedule. It also means being flexible and adaptable. So usually what I do is I schedule our mornings, and our afternoons are free for all. There's no schedule in the afternoons. And so it kind of balances out having some sort of structure, but then it also gives the kids independent time to play and do something different.
Oh, those are great tips. So how about if a household has older children, say like teenagers? What kinds of tips would you give there, and would they be different from the younger ones?
I definitely would. Teenagers like to be more self-sufficient and autonomous. And so it might even be getting them to create their own schedule or their own set of routines for them, because most teenagers don't want to get up at 6 a.m. like they might have for school. Now during COVID, they might have their peak hours from noon until 3 a.m. and that's going to be their schedule and their routine. So making sure that they can still do the things that they want to do, but also have their priorities of what they still need to get done for their work and school. And again, keeping that balance, but having them autonomous in the decision making and guiding with them is more important for those older kids.
Oh, that's great. Now we got a comment here from Ed. He says, I'm a grandpa and I'm missing my grandkids. Little children have literally hands-on relationships.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem natural to not be able to throw my little grandsons into the air and catch them. So these added distance relationships feel awkward. So I mean, why don't we talk a little bit about that? How about on the other side, we're talking about children a lot. How about the needs of like grandparents, you know, the aunts and uncles, the ones that are not able to see these families anymore, maybe just through Zoom? How do you handle that kind of mental health?
Yeah, well, keep in mind that the stuff that Julia shared today, it's very applicable across the lifespan too, right? So I know with grandparents, it's you can form a cohort family now with social distancing, with physical distancing. So if that's possible for your grandparents, and they've been self-isolated for the last 14 days, and they're not floating anywhere else, they can form a cohort family where they can come and visit, and vice versa. You can visit them. But that, you know, that is one way, because yeah, I agree, like Zoom can only do so much. When you have grandparents, grandkids, that is so precious, really. And so if you can form that cohort family, and when it's just between those two parties, it can work physically.
Yeah, so there's always those different kinds of options out there, right?
Yeah, I think Julia was going to say something.
Yeah, I do think it depends on the age of the child as well for that, just because when they're younger, it's a lot harder to put them in front of a screen. It's not the same as cuddling a little baby. You can't have that type of connection that you can with a small child. The kids who are 5, 6, or 7 might be able to play games online, like via Zoom. I know even my 4-year-old will play I Spy with My Little Eye with my dad via Zoom. So there's fun ways to integrate play with the technology, but if there's not something that captivates their attention, it's going to be really hard to connect with a kid on a screen.
Yeah, it's tough, but I mean, there are different ways. Maybe, Ed, maybe you can throw the computer in the air while you're, talking to them on Zoom.
Make sure you catch it.
Just make sure you catch it. So guys, thank you so much for coming out today. That was amazing. I love all the information that you gave. And you know what, everybody, if you're out there, take that time, right? Take that time to just relax and realize, your situation right now. Assess your situation and take time with your family. Your family needs you. Job searching might be important. Schoolwork, of course, that's going to be important. There's lots of different things that are going to be out there that are pulling you different ways. But you always think about this, that your family is going to be the most important thing in your life. And that, you've got to be able to nurture those things. No matter what age your children are at, no matter what age your family is at, you got to be able to nurture those things. So I'm going to ask you guys this last question. I mean, what if people want to get more information about what you guys do and more about COLO Families? What can they do to get that information?
I would say follow us on social media. You can email us, or you can visit our website, www.colofamilies.com. We're trying to switch over to all virtual stuff during this COVID, but you can always reach out if you ever just even want to have a chat or a conversation. Give us an email. We'd love to chat.
That's awesome. So check that out. Check out their website. Julia, you mentioned you got a blog on there. If you want more tips about this stuff, that's what attracted me, actually. So I just saw one of those blogs pop up on LinkedIn, and I said, hey, Aaron, I'm going to reach out to you.
Cool.
Then let's see where that goes. But thank you so much for coming out today. So everyone, if you are, let me put a couple things into your calendar right now. So on Wednesday this week, we have our career boost. We've got a couple great speakers coming out, and then they're going to be talking about different tips and tricks that you guys can use in your job search. So that's going to start 9 a.m. sharp. That's going to be all online. But at the same time, we're going to have an employers fair. So we've got a handful of employers who are actually looking to hire people just like you. They've got lots of hiring going on, and they need help. So if you guys are looking for work right now, maybe it's a temporary job, maybe it is something that you're looking for, maybe in the long term, then definitely come out to that. Again, all this stuff is going to be online. It's going to be a virtual job fair. You're going to be able to chat and meet with these recruiters who are looking for people just like you. So today is Monday. Mondays suck, but not today, because, I mean, after this, we got great tips from Aaron and Julia, and this afternoon we're going to get more tips and more help about your job search. We've got a 2-for-1 deal today, so I've got my friends coming in. We've got a pair of amazing speakers from Suncor. They're from the Talent Acquisition Department, and they're going to be talking about the brand of you. So how can you use branding for yourself so that it can work in your job search? We'll come later at 2 o'clock. We're going to send out the link to you. I mean, if you don't have the link, put it in the chat box right now, and I could send it to you through the chat box. But if you've already registered, then that's great. All the information about our webinars that we've done this past month, and even the one today, and the resources, they're going to be on our website at mycareerconnection.ca/events. So, Julia, Aaron, thank you so much for coming in today. We really appreciate all those tips and tricks that you gave to us. My name is Michael Manzano, and I'm with Career Connection at Bow Valley College. Thanks again for coming out, everyone. And remember, just to stay safe, stay strong, because we're going to get through this together. Thanks, guys.